Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we've been covering the very rocky transition to the new over-the-air television standard here in the United States called ATSC 3.0 or Next Gen TV. And that transition got even rockier this week because there is now a dispute between two of the standard's big partners here, the Consumer Technology Association, who represents all of the TV and electronics manufacturers here in the U.S., and the NAB, who represents the broadcasters. And what makes this dispute so significant is that the two organizations have been working very closely together as the standard is rolling out. In fact, the Next Gen TV logo, which is what appears on consumer equipment that's been certified, is actually a registered trademark of the Consumer Technology Association, not the National Association of Broadcasters. So this dispute, again, is a pretty big deal. Now, before we dive into this topic, I do want to let you know that this video is being brought to you by all of you. That includes everyone who subscribes to this channel and watches on a regular basis, along with those of you who have contributed to the channel through my donor box page at Lon.TV/support, or through Patreon, Floatplane, or the YouTube membership program. And of course, the number of you who have been picking up mugs and other merch in the new merch store. I want to thank everyone for your ongoing support of the channel. It does help keep the lights on around here. And now, why don't we dive into what this dispute is all about. So if you'll recall, the last time we talked about the ATSC 3 topic, we covered the broadcaster's request to the FCC to get the ball rolling on the official transition, and they asked for 2028 as being the cutoff time in which the current standard goes away and the new one begins, at least for most of the major markets here in the U.S. Now, inside of that request that they made, there were a number of mandates that they were asking for. One of them we talked about 2 weeks ago, which is that the broadcasters want the FCC to force TV manufacturers to put those ATSC 3 tuners in now, well before the deadline, so that there's enough tuners out in the marketplace to receive these signals that will eventually be the only signals you can receive over the air. But there were a couple of other mandates that I missed in the broadcaster's initial report that we're going to talk about now. This one here says if there is a button on the remote control to access online services like Netflix, there should be a button on the remote control to access broadcast television. So here the broadcasters are asking the FCC to mandate what buttons go on your remote control. Then they also said that if there's a menu in the user interface that displays online content sources, broadcast should be, by default, placed among the first page of those content sources. So that means that if they had some arrangement with Netflix to put an advertisement up on the first page of your TV interface, there should be a broadcaster spot in the same area. Now, of course, TV manufacturers make a lot of money selling space on their remote controls along with selling space in their user interfaces. That's why TVs have gotten so cheap. They're subsidized by all of the advertising that goes on them. And so as you can imagine, the Consumer Technology Association is not crazy about any of these requests for mandates and has really gone, I don't want to say nuclear, but pretty close to it. So the other day, Gary Shapiro, who is the CEO of the Consumer Technology Association, took to LinkedIn to begin their retort of what the broadcasters are asking for. Gary says the NAB is at it again, first pushing to mandate FM chips in phones, misleading policymakers about AM radio, and now forcing Next Gen TV onto every consumer and manufacturer. He says that this is a product that costs more and consumers have not embraced. This will impose large percentage increases in cost at a time when the TV set has proved to be the rare deflationary product. He goes on to say, the simple fact is fewer than 10% of Americans rely on antennas for TV viewing. These proposed mandates only add unnecessary costs at a time when affordability is top of mind for American families. Here's where it gets pretty ugly here. Rather than innovating, broadcasters are lobbying for regulations to prop up their failing business model. It's also a stark reminder of why they should not be allowed to consolidate and control markets. If their technology had real value, they wouldn't need government mandates to sustain it. Now, in addition to a LinkedIn post, the CTA started sending its staff out to meet with FCC commissioners directly. Now, I follow these dockets pretty closely, and one of the rules of the FCC is that if you are meeting with a commissioner to discuss a particular docket item, you have to file a summary of that meeting on the docket so all of the parties to the docket know what was discussed. It keeps things open and fair, especially as the FCC commissioners eventually have to make a decision on this topic. So in one of these meetings, which took place on March 17th, the CTA met with the commissioner to talk about their concerns, the ones that were raised in Shapiro's LinkedIn post there. But they also did some research on what an ATSC 3 equipped television costs versus an ATSC 1.0 TV. And as they say here, the two most expensive televisions cost significantly more than the others. And those two, of course, had 3.0 tuners, whereas the others did not have those tuners. And they said, given the sample, in addition to other known factors such as patent licensing costs, it is reasonable to conclude that consumers would pay more if all televisions were mandated to include an ATSC 3 tuner. And this comes back to this problem that has been plaguing the transition from the get-go, which is that tuners are too expensive, not only for consumers, but also for manufacturers to make, because the market size is relatively small. As the CTA notes, fewer than 10% of Americans watch TV over an antenna like I do, and maybe some of you do. I think more people would if the tuners were more available, especially for the ATSC 3 standard. Why are there not more ATSC 3 standards? Can you take a guess? Oh, I know. Could it be the DRM that they've imposed on this new standard, which makes it very difficult for a small manufacturer to be able to meet all the requirements and liabilities involved with securing their device. And as such, we're not seeing much choice out there for tuners. There's certainly not a lot of stuff for us YouTube creators who cover this stuff to talk about. And as we've seen over the number of tuners we've reviewed so far, the quality is not so great because there's not much of a market out there. And that market, of course, is being restricted by how hard it is to enter it. So case in point here, we could be seeing tuners as low as $58. This one we reviewed a little while back is called the HD TV Mate. It is ATSC 3 compatible, but it doesn't meet the DRM standard because they couldn't afford to go through the process. And I think by now we would see a lot of devices like this one that would be at this price or lower if not for that DRM requirement. Now, this is not going to go away. The broadcasters are insistent on running with it. I don't think the CTA wants to get involved with the DRM fight, but the reason why there's no tuners out there is because it's so hard to make one affordable for consumers to purchase, and that's ultimately what is going to make this transition so difficult. So what are my predictions here? Well, I think that we're not going to see these mandates happen, at least the ones that the CTA is concerned about. I can't see this FCC commissioner having the government mandate what a remote control looks like or what goes in a TV. What will happen is that the transition will likely move forward, at least on the timeline that the broadcasters are looking for, and the market's going to figure this all out. Unfortunately, I think this will spell the end of over-the-air television, given how restrictive it is for people to tune into it. And perhaps that is what the FCC chairman is hoping will happen, so that spectrum can be freed up for other things. The sad part here is that this was all avoidable. If we had, over the last 2 years, a lot of time to get more and more of these cheap tuners out there, I think we would have seen a much more vibrant marketplace, even if it's not a huge market to be competing in. But we've got what we got now, a bunch of lousy Android TV tuners that are going to cost way too much, and consumers will be looking for other ways to watch television in the future. I am not giving up on this DRM thing, though. So if you haven't already, you can go over to Lon.TV/FCC instructions, and you, as a citizen of this great country, can file your thoughts on the record so the FCC can hear from you about why this DRM has been such a bad thing for the development of this TV standard, because there is a lot of great stuff in the ATSC 3 standard. Better signal quality, better video quality, HEVC video compression, all these great things, except it's hindered by this very strict DRM requirement that very few manufacturers can afford to meet. And that ultimately is the problem here. So we'll keep an eye on this rolling forward. I'm sure there will be a lot more to come. Expect next for the FCC to put together their formal process for approving this transition. There will be more opportunities for the public to comment when that occurs. Sometimes they even hold field hearings where you can come in person and say what's on your mind. So there's more to come here. We'll keep an eye on it. And I will be watching this docket very closely to see what happens next. But I think we can all agree the root cause to all of this nonsense is a very restrictive DRM requirement. That will do it for this one. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.